Question 1. Broken vise shows up in the scrap bin. What do you do?
greensandmachines.com.
Alright, I'm gonna attempt to fix this vise. Someone broke it at work and I fished it out of the scrap bin. I'm gonna attempt to face this off and tap some holes in here. I got some 3.5-inch bolts that are 1/4 inch, but I think I'm gonna go for 5/16 because there's actually more thickness there than I thought. This probably isn't gonna fit in my machine vertically, so I'm gonna see if I can do some trick horizontal milling setup with my lathe. We'll see what happens. Alright, today the big vise gets its chance to shine, so we gotta take off the little one, put it on the table. So I realized I still didn't have the bolts for bolting the parallels down, except the long ones for when I put the 1, 2, 3 block under it. And I think that's the setup we need anyways today to lift the vise up higher. So that's what we'll be doing. Now it's probably not the most secure looking setup in the world because over here I have actual 1, 2, 3 blocks, but over here I don't have 4 of them, so we just use precision 1-inch parallels and they're not moving, so I'm pretty satisfied. Now to bolt the vise on. Alright, I got it pretty close. I'll check it again once I get the part in there. But this vise jaw isn't necessarily flat. Doesn't look surface ground, just blanchard ground. So it might be dished somewhere along there. Alright, I'm setting up for the horizontal milling step. I've never actually done this before, but I've seen people do it online and might actually be more successful than the vertical milling, or more rigid, I'd say. I have all these parallels set up. I had to put these ones in because the travel limit prevents me from going all the way to the end. And at least like this I'll be able to get the roughing steps done or just mill all that out. Probably not the location of the holes because I have no way of raising it up and down. Unless I just uniformly drill them from the sides. We'll see. Let's play put the camera right in the metal chip zone. Now I must say I'm very impressed. I don't think I've ever taken a 40 thou depth of cut on this machine, especially not with the vertical milling, because horizontal milling is so much more rigid because you got all that support versus having to arch over like this, and even exaggerated here because this just bolts onto a cylindrical shaft. But also the favorable cutting conditions today. We got cast iron, which is pretty soft. And this, my Seco cutter's back in service after crashing it in the molding press video. I think I'm going to drop the parallels about 1/8 of an inch so I can cut the rest of that web off right there and adjust it so it can travel all the way to the end. I think when I face the finishing pass, I'll either do it in the vertical with a really long end mill, or I'll just get a fly cutter that's like that big in diameter and lower this down so it just cuts it all in one swoop. Yeah, that looks righteous. Even that finish is nice. Alright, so now I got those 3 setups done.
all these edges roughed out. I think I'm just going to hit down these islands on the bench grinder so I don't have to do another setup for that. Next I'm going to figure out how to hold it there so I can flat cut the whole thing in one pass. Got rid of those islands, getting ready to flat cut. Burning paint smell. I didn't even know this was painted. It just looks like metal color. Yeah, that stuff was pretty soft. Cast iron. Hey, while we're at it, let's just mill this side in the same setup. Alright, I think I'm just going to do the rest in the vertical mill setup because this setup isn't as rigid as when I have the longer beam right there. This thing started moving when I was cutting it. But as to that, here's a lesson on how brittle cast iron is. That was easy. Break them off. Alright, so I had to re-indicate the vise because gripping the half of the vise right here caused this side to open up. So I re-indicated this flat again. And one complaint I have about this vise is it's not like those Kurt vices that have that angled thing that pushes down as you push in. So as you tighten it, it kind of lifts up. And as a result, my parallels on this side have been repeatedly loose while this side is tight. So that's just something to consider. But as far as fly cutting this end, if it's tilted this way, it shouldn't be a problem. I'd only be worried if it's like off this way or this way. But I'll indicate it in, make sure it's close enough. And I'm thankful that the wall thickness right here is good enough that I can tap a hole in there, which I'll do later. Well, that took a lot longer than I wanted it to, mainly because I left a low spot in the corner when I did the roughing passes, but I was able to get it off at long last, and I have a surface that is smooth. That way when they bolt together, there will be no doubt that they're together. Oh, and I think I found out why this vise broke. Because it was made in metric fastener land. And everyone knows that metric fasteners are only good for that broken IKEA furniture you find in the dumpster. Watch all my foreign viewers unsubscribe. I'm just kidding. But really, American bolts are so much easier to work with. And I'm going to add some to this so it'll stay put together. Look at me talking trash on the metric system when I have a scrap attack banner inspired by the French Revolution. Aren't there the people that invented the SI system? Well, at least their bicycles reflect that. Well, I managed to face this side of the vise, but I noticed that it took off more material on this side because this side looks uncut right here. So I indicated it and it looks out pretty badly off in flatness. So I'm going to set it up better and recut the fly cutting because I don't want this vise to be off by like 100 thou from end to end. That would look ugly. So I fixed the problem by putting some 25 thou shims underneath this parallel. Because I mentioned before the vise was lifting up this edge. So I compensated by increasing the height of that parallel. and also by hitting it with the brass hammer a few times. Now I'm able to get the jaw within about 10 thou from side to side, which is pretty good, and then about 5 thou from this way, which is probably not as important, but better to be closer than further. This way I know when the vise comes together, it's going to be straight. So that looks great. So I'll put the flat cutter back in and take it another few passes till it cleans up. Alright, I got the holes drilled in this side all the way through both sections. I had to do 2 setups because while I have this nice big vise for my machine now, I'm still limited by the amount the mill head sticks out. So while I had it over there, I couldn't reach all the way to this side of the vise. So I'm hoping these holes line up regardless of that. And I ended up using 3/8 bolts because, well, mainly because I realized I forgot my 5/16 tap somewhere else. So I'm just going to go with 3/8 because it looks like the section is pretty thick enough to do that. And this is just a 3/8 drill, so I'm trying to use the bolt holes as the alignment holes, avoiding that I was going to put dowel holes there, but I don't think that's going to work for the same reason why I couldn't set it up like that. So we'll see if it lines up. Next we're going to drill and tap that. So for this next part I had to calculate, since I don't have access of y-axis, I don't have access of axis movement in the y-axis. I had to calculate from the distance from the vise to the center of the chuck, and then based on where I'm setting it up and how far from the edge I need these holes, how much parallels I need. So the closest parallel I can get to that is 2 3/4. So I'll have to add 30 thou in shim, so I'll probably put 25 thou and then a 5 thou shim. And to here I'll need about 2 7/8, and then add about 1 1/8 or 1/8 of shim. So that's 2 3/4 right there. Get my shim collection and get that thing the right height. So I got all my parallels and shims in there. I just indicated it, both sides. Now it's on the center line, and I've calculated the dimension to go this way and that way. So I'll drill and tap those holes, flip it over, change the shims, and drill and tap those too. So more of the same on this side, just different parallels and more shims under there, and this one's more spread out than that. So I'm going to pull it out of the vise, see if they line up. So the bolts do go in. These ones of course are too long because I haven't bought the right length ones. I'm going to use hex heads, and a concern I had was that the vise handle might interfere with them. So what I might do is machine a 7/8 washer to fit inside that counterbore to give it a bit more clearance for when I do put the actual screws in. Only one of the holes seemed tighter than the others, the top right one, which is still pretty impressive considering how janky my setups were. How to do 4 different setups to do 4 different holes on 2 pieces. So that's pretty good. Alright, so I got all the bolts in. To my amazement, there's still clearance for this handle in spite of the bolts. So I won't be needing to mess with any of those washers right there. But the only washer I am messing with is this one. There's a snap ring and a spring, and this thing was all warped and got tangled up in the spring, so bought a bigger washer for that. Another thing I also replaced were the cap screws holding on the jaw because they were kind of messed up. But aside from that, looks like a perfect fit. Squashy grapefruit, what are you doing in my vise? You know you already squashed enough. So there it is, my very own Wilton Vise for free, just the cost of 4 bolts and a washer. I'm thinking I probably won't be able to grip stuff in here as hard as when it originally was built, but maybe I'm wrong, maybe that made it stronger, who knows. And I mentioned the vise jaws don't come together all the way on this side by a slight amount, so I'm going to put some shim stock right behind that jaw to make them straight. Other than that, I'm pretty satisfied, and maybe I'll throw in some shots of me using it. So this is like a 3-in-1 test actually. Of course we're testing the vise, but secondly, my new jigsaw blade clamp, and also the jigsaw connected to my inverter and the motorcycle battery for some portable wood chopping. So let's get to cutting. Flip that on. It says 300 watts continuous. This thing says 320 watts, but this says 600 watts peak. So I guess as long as I'm not laying on the trigger the whole time, we'll be good. Not feeling any signs of warmth in the inverter, so that's good. Blade clamp is rigid, more rigid than ever. Yeah, with the old one the blade would just slip out because I bought the wrong kind of blades. But it said it works for most U-shank and T-shank ones.